चलो, this is IGCSE Pearson Edexcel का आपका paper that is from May June 2023, no, January 2023. So this is paper 1 that would include microeconomics. So water is an example of which factor of production? Land, labor, capital, or enterprise? What do you think?
Land.
Why land? Because land covers all the physical space plus all the natural resources. So water would be defined as a natural resource and therefore it would be included in land. Labor includes, what does labor includes? Mental plus physical effort, good. What is meant by capital? What is meant by capital? Man-made resource that would be used to produce other goods and services. What is enterprise? What is enterprise? We discussed in the first class.
Entrepreneur. The
No,
risk
no.
taking.
Yeah, risk-taking ability is the enterprise. So risk-taking ability would be known as enterprise, right? So land is our answer. A firm has total cost of $700. It sells 3 items at a price of $20 each. So 700 is my total cost. Now I have to calculate my total revenue. It sells 300 items at a price of $20. So 300 multiplied by 20 would be my total revenue. TR, total revenue. 300 multiplied by 20 is 6,000.
6,000.
My total cost is 700. The question is, what is the profit for the firm? So 6,000 minus 700 would be my profit. That is 5,300, right?
Yes.
What is meant by the term supply? This is a 2-marker question. That means we would have to write 2 distinctive points in order to explain what is supply. So what is supply? Supply is what? Supply is the
सर मुझे आपकी आवाज नहीं आ रही है सही से.
one. So what is meant by supply? So what is supply? So this is a 2-marker question, and therefore we would have to write 2 distinctive points in order to explain what is meant by supply. So what is supply? Supply is the
Amount.
no. Supply is the what? Willingness
And ability.
and ability of whom?
Producers.
Of the producer. Supply is the willingness and ability of the producer to sell
At a given
or
price.
produce a certain quantity at a given price in a given period of time. So this willingness and ability would gain us 1 mark for the definition of supply, and this certain quantity and a given price in a given period of time, this would gain us the 2nd mark for the definition, right?
Yes.
So now we would move on, state one type of external economies of scale. The external economies of scale is, what is meant by economies of scale? When a business grows in size, it enjoys a lower average cost. So now when a business grows in size, think like they would be purchasing in bulk, they would be getting bulk discount, and therefore they would be enjoying a lower average cost. And when we talk about external economies of scale, it means that the business would be benefiting from external. What is external? Outside.
Third party?
Yeah. So the business would be benefiting from an action of the others. For example, government building a proper road. For example, a training institute that has opened near the business, which would allow them to hire skilled labor immediately, right? So external economies of scale is when the business is enjoying the benefits, but the reason is not the business itself, but the reason is an outside factor, an external factor. So you can state one type of external economies of scale: government improving infrastructure, right? So if the government would be building better roads, constructing better roads, or constructing a railway line, or constructing a bus transport nearby the business would be enjoying. Uh, why the business would be enjoying? Because of the road network or infrastructure. They would be receiving supplies quickly, or they could supply their product to the market more quickly and efficiently, right?
Yes.
So, define the term unique product. One marker question. What is meant by unique product? That has no similar product.
Hmm.
So
No
unique
close
product.
substitute?
Yeah, we can also write that a unique product do not have substitutes. So product that has no similar products, or you can also write no substitutes, or you can also write a distinctive product, right?
Yes.
Now, moving on, Connor owns a hair salon. He increased prices by 2% and was willing to increase quantity supplied to 2.6%. Calculate the PES. What is the formula for PES? Price elasticity of supply. Percentage change in quantity supplied upon percentage change in price. So, what is the increase in price? 2%. So positive 2%. What was the increase in quantity supply? 2.6%.
2.6.
So we would write 2.6% as the numerator and 2% as the denominator. When you would be dividing 2.6 by 2, that would give you an answer that is 1.3, right?
Yes.
So first the formula, we would be writing the formula, then the calculation, and then the answer. This is a 2-marker question. Now, using the diagram below, draw the likely effect on the market for luxury holidays after a fall in income. Label the new curve, new equilibrium price, and the new equilibrium quantity. What do you think? What would result after a fall in income?
Demand would shift to left.
Very good. The demand for luxury holidays would decrease, and therefore the demand would shift to left.
Left.
So we would be constructing a new demand curve that is D1, right? Then we would be constructing an arrow that would be showing a leftward shift, and we would be making a new equilibrium that is E2. You can write this as Q2 and this price as P2. The price has decreased, the quantity has also decreased because of a leftward shift in demand curve, right?
Yes.
So when you would label the new curve at D1 as D1 and you would be showing the left, you would be getting 1 mark. The new equilibrium price, price would fall to P2, that would also gain another mark. And then the new equilibrium quantity has also decreased to Q2, right? Then it would also be gaining you another mark, right? So this was a 3-marker question. Now, government owned Angola Telecom is to be privatized in an attempt to make the industry more efficient. What is privatization? What is privatization?
When a public
Mhm.
sector company
Very good.
becomes
Very
privatized,
good.
like
Very good. Mhm.
non-profit making organization becomes
Mhm.
their aims change profit making.
Okay. So the government firm would now be in the hands of private sector,
Private, private.
right? So their aim would be now of profit rather than of welfare.
Yes.
So explain one possible disadvantage of privatization for workers in the telecoms industry in the Angola. So explain one possible disadvantage of privatization. So what is a possible disadvantage of privatization?
Employees could lose their jobs.
Employees can lose their job, right? So we can experience a rise in, what do you say, a rise in unemployment, can we say
Hmm.
that?
Yeah.
Sure. So this is a 3-marker question and this is an explain question. So 1 mark would be for identifying an issue that is a disadvantage, right? Another 2nd mark would be for analyzing how this is a disadvantage, or uh, developing your disadvantage, right? So developing your point that you stated in the first place. Then the last mark would be your answer should be relevant to the context. And what is the context? What is the context? This is the context, right? So you have to explain one possible disadvantage of privatization for workers, specifically in the telecom industry, right? So 1 mark is for the identification of disadvantage. Another mark is for developing your disadvantage, analyzing your disadvantage, showing an impact, showing a result, showing an outcome of your disadvantage. And the last mark would be for, if you would relate your answer to the context, then only you would be receiving the final mark for the answer, right?
Yes.
So we can write uh, a possible disadvantage resulting from the telecom, a possible disadvantage resulting from the telecom industry a possible disadvantage resulting from the telecom industry uh, when in the hands of private sector would be that they would try to reduce the number of workers employed previously by the government. This would be as now the aim would be of increasing profits, thus a fall in the number of employees would be reducing overall cost and increasing profits, right? So we developed our answer according to the question, and the question specifically talked about the what industry, which industry it was talking about? The telecom industry. So we specifically wrote our answer talking about the telecom industry, right? So
Yes.
this mentioning telecom industry would be getting us the mark for relating to the context, right? And the possible
Yes.
disadvantages, they would try to reduce the number of workers. So this is the disadvantage. When you are writing the telecom industry, this is you are developing your answer to the context. Then the what is the analysis part, the analyzing part, the developing your answer part is when the number of employees would be reduced. It would reduce the overall cost, resulting in an increased profit. This is what analysis, right? So mentioning
Yes.
the industry is the relevancy to the context. Then developing your answer that a decrease in the number of employees would reduce the cost and increase the profit. This is analysis. And mentioning the disadvantage would be getting you the third mark, right? So the 3 marker question would be divided into 3 parts. So the PPC question. So this is a PPC figure 2 shows the production possibility curve for an economy. With reference to the data above and your knowledge of economics, analyze the impact on the economy after a movement from A to B on the production possibility curve. So we are moving from point A to point B. At point A, we were producing 350 million capital goods and we were producing 160 million of consumer goods. After moving to B, we are now producing 450 million capital goods and 130 consumer goods. So what is this movement from A to B called? Yeah, known as. Hmm? What is this movement from A to B known as? I mentioned in the lecture that it is known as what? Resource, 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 re.
Reallocation.
Yes, the resource reallocation. This is movement along the PPC, right? So this is resource reallocation. We are diverting our resources from consumer goods to the production of
Capital goods.
capital goods. So here this is a 6 marker question. So we have 3 marks for relating our answer to the context and 3 for the analysis part, right? So if you would be mentioning the capital goods, the consumer goods, the number of the consumer goods, the number of the capital goods, we would be gaining first 3 marks of what? Relating our answer to the context. And the another 3 marks would be for analysis. What would happen next? What is the impact? Right?
Yes.
So first, as the question is talking about PPC, we would be defining what?
PPC.
Production possibility curve. So production possibility curve shows all combination of two goods that can be produced using all available resources in a given period of time, right?
Yes.
Then we would be moving on to the diagram, that the diagram shows a movement from A to B. So the graph above shows a movement from A to B where the economy is still producing at their potential. The PPC shows the potential. So the graph above shows a movement from A to B where the economy is still producing at their potential, right?
Yes.
So this movement is known as resource reallocation. Movement from point A to B shows that the economy has increased their production of capital goods. Now we would be mentioning the number from 350 to 450. From 350 million to 450 million units. Where the opportunity cost is the fall in which goods? Consumer goods, right? From 160 to 130 units. This shows economy has diverted resources from consumer goods to capital goods. Now, coming up to the analysis part. What would happen if the economy would be producing more capital goods? What would happen if we would produce more capital goods? Are capital goods good for the economy or are consumer goods good for the economy? What do you think?
Consumer goods.
Consumer goods. Consumer goods are only favorable for the consumers. But when we are talking about the economy, the economy would be only benefited from the production of capital goods, right? Because
Yeah.
capital goods are productive goods. Those goods are man-made resources that can be utilized in other businesses. So capital goods are always productive goods. So capital goods are beneficial for the economy. Consumer goods are only beneficial for the consumers, right?
Yeah.
So we would be analyzing that as the economy is diverting more resources from consumer goods to capital goods, which will result in an increase in the productive potential of the economy. So if you would be looking at our class notes, okay, then you would find that we have already mentioned there that a rightward shift of PPC, one of the factor of a shift in rightward shift in PPC is an increase in capital goods. So this is what is happening here. So you would be analyzing your point that what would happen if the capital goods would be increased. So as capital goods are productive goods, an increase in the capital goods would mean that the potential of the economy would increase in the longer run, right?
Yes.
Because by capital goods, they would be able to produce more output in future. As a result, the PPC of the economy would shift to right in the longer run. Clear?